Namaskar. Welcome to Ek Samvaad at Arunima Ankuran on the occasion of Women's Day. It's a special episode featuring Dr. Lakshmi Murthy, a change agent who's breaking the silence on women's reproductive health issues. Welcome to Ek Samvaad, Dr. Lakshmi.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Lakshmi Murthy is Additional Director, Jatan Sansthan, Udaipur, Rajasthan, India.
That's
A
right.
word about Arunima Ankuran, an initiative for positive social change through self-development. The goal is greater well-being and happiness for all. At Arunima Ankuran, we believe that each person is unique and special in some way, that each person makes a difference, that each person can make an impact, and that's what inspires us to keep going. Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namah. International Women's Day is celebrated on 8th March in many countries around the world. It is a day when women are recognized for their achievements without regard to divisions, whether national, ethnic, linguistic, cultural, economic, or political. And we are so privileged to have one such example with us today, Lakshmi.
Thank you.
I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to make many ripples.
Yeah.
Beautiful words Mother Teresa left behind. So, welcome again, Lakshmi, to Ek Samvad. I think it would be really wonderful if you could talk to us about your work and introduce yourself.
Okay, so I studied design and was very interested in design and art as a child, and so one of my uncles pushed me to try for NID, which is the National Institute of Design, and then he felt that I would do well. So thanks to him, I applied for the there was an entrance exam and an interview, and then of course I was just lucky enough to get in. And then of course I studied industrial design, and under industrial design, in the years where I was studying, you could branch off into different areas. So I studied ceramics, and what happened is that immediately after I graduated, I moved to Rajasthan and moved to Udaipur in Rajasthan. And no dramatic reason for that. It just got married to a Rajasthani man. So I just came here. So that's the reason I came here. Otherwise, if I had, perhaps if I had married somebody from Karnataka, then maybe I would have been somewhere else. So it's just one of those things. And it was a very hard years for me because Udaipur was a very small town. And I had grown up in Bombay, and my earlier years were in Calcutta. Then I grew up in Bombay, and I had a very difficult time adjusting to Rajasthan. I didn't know the language very well, because you speak your mother tongue at home, and then it's English after that, and then Hindi was something that I just learned to pass the Hindi exam. And so I had to learn a lot of Hindi here because very few people speak English even now. So of course now I'm very fluent in Hindi, and I can take day-long sessions in Hindi, something that I couldn't have ever imagined. So the time that I joined, the time that I came into Rajasthan, literacy levels were very low for women here. In 1986, it was around 16% of women in Rajasthan would be literate. So that's the kind of scenario that I had come into, and making a space for design as a young designer was extremely difficult because there was no industry here except the marble industry. So I really didn't know how I could fit myself in, where I could be. And that's the thing when you're young, you are resilient, and then you just find things that you can do. And so the development sector was an area which offered some kind of flexibility and space. So I could, just get into the development sector. And it would be small assignments like making a poster or, making a flip book or some chart or something like that. So it was very far removed from ceramics or very far removed from pottery, which I had actually studied. But those were calls I was taking because I also by then had I have a daughter. She was born in '88, so you make these compromises, if you will, if you want to call it that. Well, I looked at it as a compromise then because I just felt that after having put in so many years of design education, it was very difficult to just stay at home or very difficult to be satisfied with little work. It wasn't gratifying. So that's why I continued to. It was not a choice. It was just something. From middle class families, you have to pay the bills and you have to pay the rents and do the things you need to do. So you just take these decisions, right or wrong. But of course, looking back, probably that constraint that I had of living in a small town and trying to work within that small town was good for me. My first fellowship was in 1995. It was a very small fellowship from a trust in UK, and it helped me to put together all my visual communication, visual literacy work. So that sort of was a little diving board for me to move forward, and it was a very important fellowship for me because it put me in touch with a lot of people. And of course, in 1995 we didn't have computers, so it was all about letters and sending, sharing documents. And of course, by the time it was year 2000, computers had just come in, and I got this fund for leadership development, which is a very, very handsome and a very, very good fellowship, which helps you to develop yourself very beautifully. So I had opportunities to learn again, to travel a lot, to, capacity building, all that happened then. And then subsequently, I just moved on. And then the University of Queensland in Australia they have this department, Center for Communication. And so they have a little award which they gave out. They used to give out. I think it has stopped now, but I got it for the year 2009 for my work in visual literacy and communication. So that's a little bit about that. And in terms of affiliations, I co-founded Jatan Sansthan, where I work now. And I'm a trustee of Ajivika Bureau, another NGO in Udaipur, and they work in the area of migration. And of course, I am also closely involved with design education. As a visiting teacher, I'm involved with a lot of student work, and I'm a member of the Board of Design Studies at the Lakshmi Murthy University in Jaipur. So that's a little bit about thing. And of course, if I were to move up and tell you about my PhD, I finished my PhD in 2 years back, and I had become a grandmother by then.
Wow.
And I think that was more joyful for me than anything else. And probably in the design department at IIT Bombay, perhaps I'm the first grandmother.
Oh,
I don't
beautiful.
think there's been anyone before. Or of course there will be more after, but I don't think there was anyone before me who was a grandma. So I'm very happy about that one.
Wow.
So I started this my studio in '88, and then but the highlight for me was I worked a lot with cloth sanitary napkins, and I've advocated for cloth pads. And even way back in 2000, I was teaching young Adivasi girls how to make cloth pads. And in 2011, the cloth pad took a turn because it had to be contemporary. The design had to be a little modern, and that was the basis also for my PhD studies. So my PhD studies revolved around cloth pads and how cloth pads contribute to health and environment. So, and then the other thing I'd like to share is I'm a firm believer of copyleft as opposed to copyright. Just copyleft is just the opposite. It's the right to copy anybody else's work and take it forward or modify it any which way. And I think copyleft is a wonderful philosophy for those in the social sector.
Yes.
Because after you've designed something, it has to benefit the greater common good. So that's the reason why it's very close to my heart. So whatever we make at Jatan Sansthan, subsequently over the years, I merged my design studio with Jatan Sansthan, just logistically and easier, to make it easier for myself. And Jatan Sansthan too draws the same copyleft wagon. So that's I guess a little bit about this and that and the other.
Lovely. So you got the Goonj Award
Yes,
for
that's copyleft.
Yeah. Wow.
And then the Pune International Center, they have a social innovation. It's a big exercise they do every year. So in 2018, we were kind of there were some 2-3 people were shortlisted, and I was one of them. And so we are called they mentored us over the next 1 year. So that was also very nice. And of course, in 2015, there was UGERPADS was nominated to designed to improve life. This award is it's a Dutch award, so we got shortlisted even in that. So just a few things.
So amazing how much work one can do in one lifetime. It's such an inspiration to listen to the work that you've been doing, Lakshmi. So I think first question that comes to my mind is, these are not topics that everyone is talking about so comfortably, and especially in the setup where you are working, Rajasthan particularly. Talk to us about some of the challenges that you had to face, even getting people to open up and listen, not even talk. You talking and them listening even. How did you meet that challenge?
See, the fellowship that I received was to work with adolescent girls. So when you're working with adolescent girls, the approach is the good practice approach is always talk to the family. So conversations with mothers, conversations with fathers, even before you start any intervention with adolescents. So that is a strategy that we had kind of imbibed. I had imbibed it anyway because I was earlier working for an NGO. So it's always good to keep everyone in the loop in the village. A teacher or the other, or maybe the sarpanch, someone who understands the intent of what you're doing. And reproductive health is very tricky, because when does reproductive health cross the line and get into pornography? It's a very kind of tricky line. And parents, early marriage was the norm. In 86, 88, early marriage was the norm. Even 2000, even in the year 2000, I have had a 14-year-old pregnant girl in my class. So, and it was considered very normal, because the common thing would be uski maawari shuru ho gayi. That means for the South Indian audience, her periods had started, and so then she belongs to the in-laws. So you're married very early. You're married by 8, 7, and then you are still in your parents' house. And the minute you start your period, then you're transferred because you're labor for your husband's family. So those were things. Personally, those were very difficult things for me to accept. It took a long time for me to, coming from an urban background and then getting thrown into this kind of environment. It took a little time, but I subsequently understood why I had to keep doing the things I had to do. So, and then you would have, when there's an adolescent girls group and it's a residential, you're doing residential trainings, you have to be on guard the whole night because you're responsible for so many girls. And so, of course, the local NGOs are always there. They are there. You cannot do any work unless the local NGO there is supporting you. So in those days, I wasn't working for one NGO because I was freelancing and coordinating across 10, 12 NGOs. So for my early work, I'm very grateful to those groups because they would look after the trainees. I didn't have to worry about logistics. So those were easy for me. Challenges would be things like, a drunk man would just come in the middle of a training and try to disrupt it. And then the challenge is that the attention span of adolescents is very low. And within 30 minutes, you've just lost them. So you have to keep looking at different things. And that's when I learned how to design and create activities which are participatory, which I still continue to do, because that keeps the young people focused and rooted to what you're doing. So challenges, these were some of the challenges. Or there would be things like we never had electricity most of the time. And the spaces that we would be doing our workshop in would be, say, a broken down government school, dark room with one window, all those things. And then whenever the electricity would come, we would quickly put the plug in and then project slides on the wall. So we had the overhead projectors. You might be familiar with them. They were plastic sheets, and you put the plastic sheets on. And so once, when we set up the projector, somebody in the group said that Lakshmi Ben is going to cut our stomachs open. This is an operation device. So all the children ran out from the workshop. It took us about 3 hours to calm everybody down and say that, no, this is something, it's a learning tool. So things like that. So those were some of the things I remember from then. And the challenges will be men, including men, is a huge challenge. It's a little easier now because we worked for so long now to break silence with men, to include men who continue to kind of feel it's not their business and forget that it's the source of life itself. All those things. So for menstruation, particularly involving men, keeping them interested, those have been challenging.
So Lakshmi, area where very few people would have had the courage to tread. What made you choose this specific area to work in, reproductive health? What was the motivation?
When I was a child and coming from a South Indian home, we came from a family that had a little muddy. Muddy is, we were Orthodox. So my grandmother had these, my party had all these, a couple of rules. So when I got my periods, I couldn't understand why I couldn't touch her. So I think my problem began then. And I was very close to my grandmother, very, very close to her. And then at the same time, these 3 days, she would be all, she'd be very fussy. So I just couldn't understand why she was doing this. And then, of course, I knew part of it was superstition, etc., etc. And I carried this thing with me, almost throughout school and throughout college. Of course, subsequently in my own home, I made the first change. I sat in my grandmother's lap and I said, now what are you going to do? So it was aisa tha. So that, of course, that part I remember so well because my mother has never let me forget it because it made her life easier after that little action of mine. So when I came into Rajasthan and started working, initially my work was in visual perception and visual literacy, because people who are non-literate interpret visuals and images in a different way as opposed to people who are literate. So you have to draw pictures differently for communities who have not had opportunities for formal education. So I was in the business of visual communication and literacy. And I would meet a lot of young people in the process. And I was using disposable pads. And I just couldn't kind of understand why girls were still using cloth. And then that sort of started an inquiry into why cloth. Because I thought cloth was something only my mother and grandmother had used. And of course, I had used cloth for a short time, probably just about not even a year. And then I had switched to disposable. I would have got my periods, in 1970? So I started this whole inquiry for myself about why are, what is this thing about cloth? And then I understood many things. It's economics. It's what is easily available. It's something that you don't get disposable pads in the village, all those things. This was what in the early years, it was 90s. What I'm talking about is, 90s. So, and it's this, my journey started about understanding why is there no disposable products for menstruation. And then I understood the larger picture that can't be. Disposable is not the answer for managing a natural phenomena. There are a lot of advantages with cloth, and that is how I started my journey with exploring what is with a cloth pad, and why I advocate personally for cloth pads, and why I believe that this is probably one product that is empowering, because women can make it themselves, menstruators can make it themselves, and make it from cloth that's available at home. So those are some of the reasons why I started looking at cloth pads and working in this area. So I think my motivation was my own experience with menstruation as a young girl. And I'd heard about, my mother had told me that there'll be one puja after you start menstruating, and I was very uncomfortable with those things. And I said, no, these things, I will not participate if there's a puja. So I think I was a bit of a terrorist right at home when I was young. And I was naturally a bit bold about talking about all this. And maybe my training as a designer also helped, because the design education prepares you to be uninhibited. And that is the biggest training we got when we were studying design. I think it is still there to a large extent. Inhibition is, you are encouraged to shed your inhibitions and just be creative, just go all out, explore. So I think those help, because I didn't have a health or a nursing background, because as a designer, I got into the health sector. So, yeah.
So I think, Lakshmi, one of the questions that would naturally come to anyone who's listening in is that, there is a reason why people prefer the disposable ones as compared to the cloth ones. So in terms of, the risk, we can call it perhaps, of leakage and so many practical issues, just tell us a little more about your design and how it's overcoming those obstacles.
See, it will leak. Cloth pads will leak. There's no other. I mean, this is my statement, that cloth pads will leak, and it's a lifestyle change. Everyone has to be ready and accept that it's an inconvenient product. But having said that, once you start using cloth pads, you learn how to manage cloth pads. Essentially, you will have to change a little more often than you would change a disposable pad. Unfortunately, the disposable pads that were made, let me just now change gear here. The disposable pads that we got when we were young did not contain gel. The chemical gel is what is very commonly used now. It's a polyacrylate substance. Very commonly, it's merged with the absorbent core. So what happens is that the pad gets thinner and thinner and thinner, and you can wear it for longer and longer and longer, because the gel immediately absorbs and prevents the leak. It solidifies the minute liquid falls on the gel, it kind of solidifies it. That's the reason why leakage is low in a disposable pad. Now, in the case of a cloth pad, the blood is just dispersing itself all over, and yes, there will be a leak after some time. And washing a cloth pad is extremely traumatic for young people, because especially privileged young people who have washing machines, they've never washed their clothes. Even a lot of young people don't even wash their underclothes. It just goes into the machine. Of course, why not? I mean, if a boy can put his banyan and underwear into a washing machine, why can't a girl? I mean, so I'm happy about that part. But if you are from a lower economic background, you're used to washing, and cloth pad washing is not seen as a burden. It's not seen as a burden. But of course, if you give the lower economic group disposable pads all the time, perhaps they will also use it. It's just that they can't afford to spend their 100 rupees or 200 rupees a month on disposable pads. So cloth pads it's a lifestyle change. And in my experience, a lot of urban young people have made the switch because young people also report rash and boils and discomfort with gel pads. So if you are a sufferer, you will be happy to switch to a cloth pad, or of course nowadays you would switch to even a menstrual cup. So a menstrual cup has been there since 1930, but it's come into India since 2005, and of course now it's become extremely popular across some urban scenarios, some rural scenarios also. So and menstrual cups don't suit people, a lot of users, and disposable pads too don't suit a lot of users. So I believe that you have to give menstruators a choice. Use this, use this, use this, use a combination. Here's everything. Do what works for you. That's what we would like to sort of. That's the advocacy part.
So you're doing a lot of training with reference to frontline workers.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that and how do you go about doing it?
See, for that we are commissioned. We're commissioned to conduct trainings. So, for example, an agency will get in touch with you, and then they will give you a brief, and they will say that, okay, we have 800 frontline workers that you have to train. So I will build up my team. I have a team in place now in Jatan, but so previously I would build up a team, and then you would plan it as a cascading training. So simply that means that you will first identify, say, 50 teachers, 50 trainers who will then disseminate this information. It's like a training of trainers. So you will first design what you want to disseminate. Then you will design your communication products. You will design a manual for the trainers to follow. It's like a lesson plan, just like a teacher will make a lesson plan for her school students. We also will make we call it a session plan, or a in Hindi we call it satra. So the satra design is like that. So it tells you how you need to conduct a training over 3 days or over 2 days, or depending on the time duration. And then in a cascading training, after you've trained the 50 trainers over, say, a 3-day period or a 4-day period, you will go into the blocks with them. You will be the team will pair with that trainer, with the teacher, and journey them through one whole training. Okay. So that it's like a hand holding. And then after that, you might do a one more or two more, and then the teachers are confident, and then they disseminate it on their own. So that's what I mean by cascading training. And that is how we would work with ASHA workers and frontline workers. Very commonly, we could, the largest group I've done is 800. And this we did over a period of 2 years. And the smaller ones will be, say, 50, 60. Like, for example, in the Nizamuddin Basti in Delhi, we worked with their health workers for over 2 years. So it was a very intensive program. So it depends on, whether it's a government program, whether it's an NGO program, who commissions you to do that kind of work. So, yeah, that's...
so if you can also share some of the content, what is the course content like?
Okay. In the ASHA training for reproductive health, we do what's called a life cycle approach. So from birth to, not even birth to death, from conception to death, what is the cycle? What is involved in the life cycle of a woman? So, for example, as soon as you've conceived, you will have to take care of yourself, all the pre-pregnancy care, your weight, your blood pressure. So those are things that you would train your health worker to look at. How would you take the blood pressure? How would you weigh the woman? What are the danger signs you're looking at? And then have you registered the pregnant mother in the Anganwadi center? Is she getting the nutritious food? All that happens. So that's one part of the learning, which is the conception part. Then there's a delivery part. and then there is the post-delivery part. So you would train for each of these areas. So what is the care to be taken during delivery? What is the care to be taken post-delivery? And then once your child is born, because it all comes into reproductive health. Once your child is born, what are the vaccinations that are required? What is the nutrition that you have to give a child? That happens. Then you move further, and then you move into now adolescence. What are changes in the body as a child grows, as a young teenager? What is to be expected? What do you expect for a boy? What do you expect for a girl? And then once that moves on, you move into the marriage framework. So, and then the training is all about contraception. Then once you've done the contraception part, then of course menstruation is also a big part that would probably happen before the contraception sessions. And then you would then look at menopause. You would look at what happens to older women, and then finally you will look at death. And in between, you will also look at the public health, the common diseases like malaria, so you would also train for that. So that involves this whole thing on, if you're training for reproductive health, it's all these, it's a gambit of these subjects. It could be HIV, it could be sexually transmitted diseases. Those are what we will speak about. So typically, if you have commissioned us to only look at, say, sexually transmitted diseases in HIV, our sessions would cover that. If you have commissioned us to do the whole life cycle thing, we will do a training for you over 7 days, and this is what it will cover. If it's menstruation, then okay, it's 3 days. What is the group? What kind of group are we talking to? All that sort of comes in. So yeah, so
be a really tough job, because from what you're saying, I'm sure it's a very uncomfortable kind of a transfer in the initial stage, because of the cultural issue, which is
absolutely.
What kind of feedback do you get? Share some of the feedback that makes it all worthwhile.
See, the feedback that we, like, for example, 20 years ago, it was common to have 5 children. Very, very common in the areas where we were working. 3 children, 4 children, very, very common. And we would speak a lot about spacing your child. Give a 2-year gap between 2 children. So when young mothers, you meet some young mothers later, they'll come and tell you that, thank God we learned about the copper T, So now I know about these things, and I can plan the size of my family. So those things become, those are our rewards. Or a young man will come and tell you that, thank God you spoke to me about menstruation before. I didn't feel like a fool in front of my wife.
Yes.
Those things are very, it makes you quite pleased when you hear that. And for me, the biggest thing is when we speak about abortion, because I believe it's a reproductive right. So I think everybody has a right, right over their bodies, and they have the right to decide what they want to do. But young people, for example, when you're 15, 14, 16, you're that age group, when you've just learned about sex, there is this understanding that young people have, that if you have sex one time only, you don't get pregnant. एक बार में बच्चा नहीं ठहरता है. That is what young people believe. But that's not true. You can get pregnant even in the first encounter. So then a lot of discussion happens around why sex comes with responsibility. And this we talk to the boys. It's very easy to patao someone. So why do you need to be responsible? Because it's a question of your girlfriend's life, and it will affect her whole life. So what is it that you need to do? So when young men come back and say, thank God that you told me all this. Or there's a lot of mardangi amongst young men. Mardangi is masculinity, macho, feeling very macho. So one young 19-year-old makes a random comment amongst the peer group that, I've slept with like 3 girls or something like that, which may not even be true, then the others feel, I've lost out. So there's this anxiety to kind of make girlfriends, or so we have these long discussion sessions where case studies are given to young people to discuss. And then there's a lot of brainstorming on why when a girl says no, it means no.
What are some of the projects that are the most memorable for you in your own experience?
The memorable for me is the very, very recent one, which I just come back this morning from. We worked in 12 jails in Haryana. So I will go backwards. So that has been extremely overwhelming. Across Haryana, we were in 12 jails, and the inmates range from 75. The largest group we found was almost 90, and the smallest group in one of the jails was 32. So that's this huge expanse of inmates. And totally in this project, we started working in October, and we would have covered about 900 to 950 inmates. And 10 to 12% of the inmates would have menopause. So that remains, that makes the rest of them. So the overwhelming thing about being imprisoned is that what was also new for me is that within a jail complex, the women's cell is a small block, and it's a prison within a prison for the women. The men still have a garden and a lawn to roam around, and the women are just boxed in, and their living conditions are. Haryana prisons are the best are considered the best prisons in India, and they were very clean. But in terms of talking about menstrual health, see, all these women who we worked with are under trials or they've been convicted, and some of them have been there in the prison for 15 years, on a murder charge or something like that, or you're there for a shorter time, like 5 years or 6 years. It could be on a drug charge, it could be on a 420 visa fraud charge, or it could be anything, all the regular crimes. And then talking about menstruation, then you just because the space is so small, and in some prisons you don't get enough water because it's in a dry area. So disposable pads have been provided by CSR projects. So we were there talking more about superstition, because it's a floating population. So the inmates will come and they'll go. Some are there for, say, 20 days. Some would be there for 20 years. So that's the range. So that was extremely overwhelming, because I had never worked with women who are boxed in like that. So, you, for example, cannot speak about balanced food or balanced diet for a group like this, because they only get 2 meals a day. Simple dal roti, you get it once in the morning and you get it once in the evening, and so the jail kitchen typically, they cook for 1,500 to 1,700 inmates, because the male block has about 1,200. It depends on the prison, but it's common for a prison to have more than 1,200 inmates. So whatever food is being made in the jail kitchen comes into the women's block. So you can't talk about things like eat nutritious food. How can you say that? So those were difficult for me, because we talk about nutrition so much, and then that was one thing that I couldn't speak at all about. And then cloth pads had to be introduced into the prison, because disposable pads are not always available, and a lot of women have problems with disposable pads. So that's the reason why we included this. And the jail authorities just give you 2 hours to finish your, because for security reasons, you can't stay too long. You can't kind of linger there, and permissions are taken much in advance. Who's coming from Jatan, their iCards go in, all that. So within that 2 hours, you have to be really quick and get get moving and understand the psyche of the women. So we have devised these simple systems where we have a set of 6-7 questions. For example, does pickle spoil during your periods? And then we talk about that. So that jail project has been extremely an overwhelming one for me, which we've just kind of finished. So yeah. So that's the latest one. And then others have been, the work in Uttarakhand, which we did some years ago, was also very, very, very challenging, because we were working with 800 ASHA workers. So that transfer. So what happens is there's always an impact and evaluation. So if you've not transferred something on the top correctly, it just doesn't go down correctly. So then you have to keep correcting yourself, and you have to keep innovating all the time. So that project was very good. Then the Nizamuddin Basti project was also a very, very nice project for us, because I was working with Muslim women for the first time, and we learned so much from them. So that was just great. And we did a project in Northeast just before COVID. We were working there for 2 years. So in the Northeast, we set up cloth pad production centers in 4 remote locations. Of course, of the 4 cloth pad units we set up, only 1 is functioning. So I never imagined I would work in the Northeast. So that was very overwhelming for me, because it was, it takes forever to reach even from Guwahati or wherever we were. We were working, for example, in a district called Bordusa, which borders Burma, and it's so remote. It's like another country, and yet it's India.
So there has been so much of work that you've been doing and creating an impact. How do you look at your own journey, and what are some of the milestones that you're really proud of?
At these, in terms of career, I think these 4 milestones, 4 or 5 things which I've shared with you, is what it's, the Northeast project or the jail project or some of these. There've been plenty in between. There's so many in between that, of course, typically in a 25, 30-year career span, there are so many things you forget. So there are plenty, but these are what jump out for me. And copyleft, my copyleft space jumps out for me, which is what I also like very much. And my work with students also, I think, is a big milestone for me, because our design curriculum even today doesn't completely prepare young designers for working in the rural sector, because the overall parents measure success by, how much you're earning, or what's the package you're getting, or do you have a house, do you have a car, where you're placed, are you a CEO somewhere? Parents have all these needs, and designers' parents, the parents of designers are no different. So I support a lot of internship projects, and I support a lot of design degree projects. By that, I mean that a student comes and works with us for 6 months, and their work in my organization qualifies them for their design degree. So I have worked and enjoyed working with a lot of young people who've made major contributions for me in the menstrual space. Like, for example, we have one very, very small project on transgender, and a lot of these young people have helped me with that. So I think a milestone for me is also having worked with so many students. It's just, they don't necessarily come back to the rural sector, but I do feel they have been sensitized, because I get a lot of feedback from students whom I taught 15 years ago. So they come and tell me that, I had learned that at that time, and it became very useful for me when I did this, or something like that. So you feel very pleased with yourself.
I've been looking at one video that is there on how you actually conduct a session, and it was so amazing, the connect you established. Can Lakshmi talk to us about the beginning, the middle, and the end of one session?
Okay, so then, so it just goes like that. This is the outer part. That's how you would explain it. A trainer would wear this apron, and then you would, after you've explained the vaginal canal, and the other outer parts of your reproductive organs, you would go to the inner parts, which is the uterus. And this particular set, for example, describes how you get your periods. So it just goes like that. And then finally you keep opening the layers like that. And then in the end, you would say that, okay, now your periods have started. So this apron was designed by a group in Ahmedabad called Chetna. And we just, generally in our sector, if someone has designed a nice thing, we just don't reinvent the wheel, we just take that. So this credit for this design goes to them. So, or you would have a menstrual wheel. This is a very common product that we would use in our trainings. So it helps young people to understand how you get your periods and how it's, cyclic. So we call this the Mahavari Chakka, or the menstrual wheel. So you can see the periods happening, and then you can see how it just goes like that. So yeah. Okay. So that's one. Or you would have this describes, for example, Sundar and Sundari. And for example, how Sundar's body changes as he grows. And then if you're working with a boys group, you would just use this part. And then if the boys are comfortable, then you open the ladies part or Sundari's part. Similarly with the girls, and then you open it like that. So, and then you talk about the changes in the body as you grow. So basically it's called a Kawad book. Kawad is a traditional storytelling device in Rajasthan, which I adapted for work long back. This work is while this work is 20 years old, it's still used, and it is because it's copy left. A lot of people still use it and have got reprints of it. So this is how this would work.
Wonderful, amazing.
Okay, so that is one thing. Then, so see, when we talk about nutrition, we would use the nutrition tool, because for rural people, say even a young mother who's had very little opportunity to go to school, probably she studied till class 6. So what we do is we say that Jhande ka teen rang, the colors of the national flag must be in your food. So what's orange? All the stuff that comes in. All the food that's orange food comes in here. Or if it's white food, then all the white food comes in here. I like that to the end. Or if it's the green food. So that's how we would look at and talk about nutrition. Finally, we say, okay, this is a thali. Now tell us what's green, what's orange, and then you ask the audience, what did you eat yesterday for lunch, and did all this match and like that. So these are some training tools that we use while we work. Then typically we give takeaways. So these are little things that young people can take back. This is called Seedhi Sachi Baat, which is the truth. So it's all about menstruation. Whatever they have learned, say, for example, I just open one. Say, for example, they've learned about periods, so it'll all be in this book. So this is a takeaway. Then we give another takeaway, which is, we call it Know Your Menstruator. It's about other bodies that bleed, like, for example, transgender people or intersex people, non-binary, you may have a male body, but you're still bleeding. So it's all about other bodies that bleed, and then explain about different sexualities and like that. So that's I use a lot of training aids in my training, because my training is designed so it comes easily for me. And then finally, of course, I have to show you my cloth pad, without which I cannot Okay, so typically our cloth pad looks like that. It's a holder. It's this part is the holder. Okay, and then into the holder you put your napkin in. This is absolutely simple, sort of square napkin. And then you fold this in, and then you slip it through these. Okay, and then this goes under the underwear. So the advantage of this kind of pad for lower economic groups is that you can put your own cloth. You can put your own towel, whatever cloth you have, and then you can make this from your old cloth. So that's the reason why we promote this pad. And for example, the training team that I have, they can teach this how to make this. You typically you will take an hour and 15 minutes to stitch this pad, hand stitched.
Okay.
So supposing we are working with 100 girls, so I'll have a team of 3 going there with pre-cut pads. So everyone stitches that pad at that point, and then they take back the pad that they have stitched. So it's an empowerment tool, and we do it with boys also and men. And while the men and boys are stitching the pad, they have to think about who they're going to gift it to. Girlfriend, wife, sister, किसको दोगे आप? किसको आप किसको प्यार करते हो? बहन से प्यार करते हो तो बस उसको देना है. That way, or wife, or like that. So yeah, so then of course we also demonstrate that you can also put in other kinds of cloths, which I just said. That's how it. Yeah, so that's the cloth pad thing.
Wow.
Which I'm very excited about always. I just have to say one thing with the cloth pad. See, when I started the unit, yes, we teach people how to stitch the cloth pads, and we have a small unit where we manufacture the pads. So it's 2 things. So in 2011, when I started the unit, I never imagined, because everyone said, cloth pads, how are people going to use cloth pads in the world of disposable? I mean, what are you talking? And today we are to 2022. You open the internet, there are 25 to 30 companies making cloth pads. You can buy them on Amazon, you can buy them any which way. So the cloth pad scene, which I had intended initially for lower economic groups, has moved completely now into the urban space. And, I have to mention Ecofem in Pondicherry. I think, Ecofem in Pondicherry and Jatan in Udaipur, we were the only 2 people making cloth pads in 2011. And now there are so many. Yeah.
That's how you're making an impact.
They always excite me. Cloth pads always excite me.
Yeah. Wonderful. So Lakshmi, because there may be different people listening in, in terms of how everyone can join the mission that you're on, what are some of the things you would like to say?
One of the things that I would definitely like to say is that media has made us believe that cloth is bad. Media will tell you that cloth gives you rashes. All these pad companies will tell you that cloth is not a good thing, but cloth is a good thing. It's a natural. It's cotton cloth it's natural. Our grandmothers before us used it. Their grandmothers used it. For centuries, women have used cloth. So never be afraid to use cloth. Never be afraid to touch blood that's coming out from your body. Never be afraid about it, because it's what we are never uncomfortable when we blow our nose in this, or when we wipe our sweat. So in the same way, menstruation is a body expulsion, and it is not dirty at all. The same blood protects the child for 9 months in the womb, and that is very critical to understand, because that is if that blood was dirty, then the child would not survive. So that's the cleanest blood you can imagine, because every month the uterus is getting ready for an implantation. So that is what I will say. And then if there are younger people listening in to this, it's very important to wear white or light colored, because sometimes a discharge can be even green. A discharge can be yellow, or a discharge can be a light pink. So when you get these 3 colors of discharge, it indicates a sign of infection. And of course, there are medicines to manage everything. But typically, if you are using cloth, like the shirt I'm wearing, you will not be able to identify the 3 colors I've told you. So therefore, white becomes very critical. So that is what I will say to cloth pad users. If you're buying cloth pads, a lot of cloth pads in the market are dark colored. Dark colors are you have to rethink about this because you just don't know what you're discharging. So those are, and then, never be afraid to look at what our grandmothers did. They were sensible women. They ate balanced food. They did all the things that we should be doing now. So, and just join the clock pad Andolan with me, is what I will say.
So going from here, Lakshmi, what are some of the things that you would like to see change in the coming years? What are your plans or vision for the future?
More men involved, more more transgender people involved. Earlier, we had left out as a menstrual health community. A lot of groups had been left out. So now we are including them more and more. So 10 years ago, I started including men. But now more recently, we are including transgender, we're including, all these other groups. So I think it's very critical to be as inclusive as possible. Just include more and more. So I sort of see I hope to see a future where the market doesn't dominate. The corporate market dominates what women need, or they push you to use products that you don't really need. Clean water is all you need. So if people have to, my message would be just relook at some of the things that are going on around you and re-examine all that. So I think re-examine, relook, reuse. We have to bring all this back. And I hope that this all comes back into the future. So, and the amount of garbage that we have now, it's just so many tons of garbage. And menstrual waste is a huge challenge because it also blocks the sewer lines. So I'm hoping that all this doesn't happen after 10 years. So,
Lakshmi, from the perspective of someone who's a trainer, I'm always curious to know what are some of the skills that you think are required to do the kind of work you're doing?
Some kind of confidence, or just be bold and just go for it. Then the other very typical things which you would be familiar with, make eye contact with everyone, all those simple things that we always teach our trainers. To not be judgmental, give everyone a chance to speak, and recognize the talkative ones in the group, and the quiet ones have to be pulled out and made to sort of voice what they're feeling. Those are some of the training skills I would say that you need. And then, of course, you have to read a lot as a trainer. Keep up with what's going on. Like suddenly, however prepared you go, somebody will ask you something that you are not prepared for. So recently, I was not prepared for stages of washing your menstrual cloth. I was not prepared when a participant said that first I put the menstrual cloth on the floor and wash it with my leg. And then I take it in my hand. And so that became a big discussion point, saying that, why foot and then hand? It's the same thing, no? You can touch it with your hand. So every group brings in one new something that I've never dealt with before. So you have to be ready for the surprises as a trainer. Sort of. I mean, you know all this. So you've been in training for so long. So,
Lakshmi, one of the things that someone like you would have received a lot of the time is admiration, compliments. Talk to us about one that has stayed with you. And
see, when my training team also has men. So I just loved it when one of the men came back and said that just because of your menstrual training, I have so much self-confidence. Somewhere I had lost it. So some trigger. I don't know what you say just triggers. Be something you say. Be yourself, or say what you want. Don't be afraid. I don't know what you say, and then when some people come back and tell you that yes, your training made a difference, I get a great kick out of that. And of course, I get a great kick when the students come back and say how how they've become forever sensitive, or so. Because I one thing always stayed with me, that uh, I had a group of students once, and at that time, another NGO in Udaipur was fighting for widows' pension, which was 150 rupees that time, and they were fighting to make it 300 rupees. And so they were doing a dharna outside the CM's house. So all this was going on, and my design students were also there. And this child was just weeping. She said that, I spend 150 rupees on chips and nail polish and what am I doing? So that her realization stayed with me forever. Has stayed with me forever. I've lost touch with this person, but the fact that made an impact while she was at my course, those give you a real kick. So yeah.
I think they become inspiration to keep going on also.
Yeah, because then you just want to just not stop what you're doing.
Thank you so much for being on Ek Samvaad at Arunima Ankuran. It was so wonderful talking to a change maker who's been doing amazing work and into a territory that not too many people would have thought of treading into. So congratulations. We wish you the very best and keep making the world a better place. Thank you for being
Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so honored to have been asked to come. Thank you so much.
So it was.
And come and visit Rajasthan
Sure.
whenever you're here. You must do that. Yeah.
Thanks.